Hi, Dave. Are you ready?
Recording in progress.
Hello and welcome back to another David Hartmann webinar. Thank you guys for joining us today. My name is Donna Chow and I am your host and your moderator again. eLotus has been hosting educational courses at eLotus for over 2 decades, and we are proud to be your trusted source for premium CEU content with over 200 speakers, 700 courses, and 3,000 hours of continuing education. All right. So today's webinar is Acupuncture Point Combinations for the 8 Extraordinary Vessels with 5 Spirits, Part 1, presented by David Hartmann. Today's webinar will be from 9 to 6 p.m. Pacific time, and we will have 4 breaks with a lunch from 1 to 2 p.m. You guys can download the lecture notes, which are now available in your eLotus account through your Blue Course Access page. And if you guys want to participate in the chat room today, we do ask that you set your chat preference to everyone so that everyone can be part of the conversation and see what you are typing. If you have any questions for David regarding the course content, the topic, whatever, you can type it into the Q&A box to ask him directly. And finally, the quiz and video replay. These are going to be available for you tomorrow, and I will send you guys an email once they are available. David Hartmann is our speaker today, and he has been a licensed Chinese medicine practitioner in Brisbane, Australia since 1997. David is well known for his acupuncture point combinations, for which he also has written a textbook. David has previously taught courses here at eLotus on mental health, the 5 elements, the 5 spirits, and numerology. If you're looking for his previous courses, they're now available as CEU distant learning videos. And the best way to watch them all for free is actually to become a Gold Pass member. In a moment, I'll share more information on how to do that by sharing a link with you in the chat room. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started today. It is an honor to have David join us here. And so without further ado, David, can you go ahead and please take over and share your slides?
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, eLotus. Another wonderful opportunity to talk about some really interesting Chinese medicine material. I guess, again, it's looking at something that's not what I've found, having done a lot of international travel to lots of colleges and universities around the world, that the 8 extraordinary vessels and the 5 spirits aren't given a lot of time. And I guess that's not being completely unfair to any of those institutions, because the reality is that, you know, how much can you fit in? Say you got a 4-year full-time course, there's still going to be stuff that you have to touch on, gloss over, because you're looking at over 2,000 years worth of the medicine that you're trying to teach in that time. So the design of this particular workshop was to give you the opportunity to immerse yourself more in those ideas. So I'll just bring up the screen. There we go. So just quickly before I start, I just wanted to apologise for the late arrival of the slides. It was all getting a little bit frantic, I must admit. And yeah, so I apologise to eLotus as well. They've scrambled on my behalf. I don't think I quite understood just how long it was going to take me to get the all of the slides ready. Obviously, for some of you, you were at my most recent workshop, which was 2 days just recently on numerology and acupuncture point combinations. So to do that, and then this has been wonderful, but has taken me a really long time to sort of put together. I was trying to avoid, I guess, rehashing old content. I really wanted to try to immerse myself in the world of 8 extraordinary vessels and 5 spirits again. So yes, so I apologize if those slides have arrived a little late. Right. So as most of you know by now, if you've been to any of my workshops before, I like to use little quotes to frame what we're going to talk about, I guess, to some degree. And this one from Mark Twain's a real beauty. The worst loneliness is to not be comfortable with yourself. Interestingly, in numerology, he's a 22-4, as am I. He's a smidge more famous than me. But what I like about that quote is it's pretty obvious, isn't it? Being comfortable, I guess, in your own skin and being happy to, spend time with yourself. It's one of those interesting things that I've touched on in the past where, in previous decades, certainly when I was a lot younger, I would have done anything to avoid spending any time with myself, which of course is impossible. And over the last decade, I've come to really love myself and love my own company. And it's nice to just be able to sit in it and immerse yourself in it. I know a lot of people will tend to avoid that. They might avoid having photos taken of them, or they'll look down a lot, or they will avoid having downtime or spending time on their own. And I feel like that's sad. I feel like it's nice to know yourself. It's nice to know that you're a good person. Give yourself a pat on the back. Love yourself. It's a beautiful thing. And so I think Mark's bang on there. So as I said, or as Donna touched on, so today will be on the 8 extraordinary vessels. We'll look at that in more detail in a minute and what tomorrow has in store for us as well. Before we get into our little Aussie quiz, I just wanted, in case you haven't been to any of my workshops before, just a little bit of an extension on what Donna was saying. So I started studying Chinese medicine when I was 19 in Brisbane, Australia. When I studied, I had about 50 people that went in through the course the same time as me. And there was only one other person that was anywhere near my age. The rest were all 30, 40 plus. So it was very much more a second career choice for people, or mature age people were going through. And I guess I didn't think much of it at the time. And when I started teaching in 2000, it's been a recurring theme really through that entire time too. Not a lot of students are coming straight out of school into an acupuncture or Chinese medicine degree in Australia. I'm not sure what the experience is like, say in America or any other country that you're from. So I noticed some of you are from Canada as well and other parts of the world. I guess it was an interesting one when I graduated. I was still only early 20s. And I know some people said to me, how is anyone going to take you seriously as an acupuncturist when you're going to be younger than most of the people that you treat? And I just always went off, well, it'll be enthusiasm and excitement, and I'm young and I'm motivated. But it's a good point, if you've never done acupuncture before, but you graduate when you're 45, people that see you for the first time are probably going to think you've been doing it for 20 years, even if you haven't. Automatically, you're almost like this expert in Chinese medicine and you've been doing it for a week. It's interesting, the perception of it all. So after I studied Chinese medicine, I treated patients. I went on and did a master's degree in acupuncture as well. As I said, I've been teaching since 2000. Currently, I'm module leader for the Chinese Classics subject for the online master's degree at the Northern College of Acupuncture in York, in England. That's a mouthful. So I look after a subject called Chinese Classics. It's in the master's degree. It's an online master's degree, and I've been really enjoying that side, immersing myself in the classics and reminding myself of all of the gold that's in there, and also the contradictions and the way that they're written. It's a whole thing. I've got 2 international textbooks. We'll talk about them a little bit later on, and do lots of national, international workshops, and because I've just done 2 days on numerology, I just wanted to, I guess I'd put in that I was it was something that I'd been interested in ever since I was a teenager. All right, so let's do our little Aussie quiz. So if you don't know the rules, basically we'll work through them one at a time, and you just put it in the chat if you think you know the answer. What do you think is an ankle biter? A rugrat? A kid, a dog? Yeah, kid, child, rugrat. Yeah. I mean, an ankle biter could easily be a dog as well. I've got one of them at the moment, a little puppy, a red heeler, Australian cattle dog, and that is exactly what he does. He bites your ankles. That's the way they're bred. An ant, interesting. Toddler, kid, no idea. A mosquito, yeah. But yeah, it's a kid, a little kid. There's this little saying that I heard a few years ago where a mother will know their kids' names, their interests, their birthdays, their favorite color, their best friends' names. They'll know everything about their child, and the father will be vaguely aware of some small people wandering around the house. And at the time, I thought it was quite hysterical. And now I actually am quite put off by it because I spend a heck of a lot of time with my kids, but it's still quite amusing, vaguely aware of some small people wandering around the house. They're little ankle biters. What's an arvo? Afternoon, no idea. Avocado? No. Toast? It is afternoon. Now, this is not something I ever thought that other people from other countries weren't necessarily aware of. So when I started that job at York in England, I was typing out an email and I wrote, are you free, Friday Arvo? And they were saying, what is Arvo? So yeah, afternoon. What are bangers? Good one, Penny. What are bangers? Question mark sausages? Yeah, good one. Oh, hey, Mazza. Thank you for joining us again. She probably doesn't want, I don't know if you want to be called her Aussie name. Facial hair. Yeah, I guess that's also yeah. Hey, Davo. Sausages, bangers and mash, sausages and mashed potato. Very good. What's the big smoke? This might not be just Aussie. Big smoke, London. Fire, wildfire. It's the big city. Country people would say that a big city was the big smoke. I like your answers that you're giving. Thank you for being curious and putting out possible options out there. Yeah, big smoke's a big city. What are you referring to when you say someone is blotto? Lying, drunk? Keister. Yes, very good. Yeah, drunk. And some of you already know this one because you were here 2 days ago, and I didn't actually give this one away on purpose, but someone actually used it. What are budgie smugglers? Banana hammocks. Am I assuming that's the same thing? That's a real thing. Yeah. What was the term blotto? Drunk. Sorry, Christine. I don't know what some of those words are that people are saying. This is where live is so cool because I can find out what these terms are that you're using. No idea. Budgie smugglers. What's a budgie? A budgie is a bird, a little bird. I don't have a clue. Budgie smugglers are a male swimwear. The ones that are small like underwear, not like boxer shorts. So it's, yeah, like a Speedo. Yeah. Probably a crude way of referring to Speedos. What happens when you cark it? Yep, Philip's on it there. Throw it away? Yeah, no, you die when you cark it. What is kick the bucket? Yeah, good one. Very good. Where do these terms come from, honestly? What is claret? Oh, you've got some good answers there. Short for clarity, because we do like to abbreviate. It's not clarity, it's not clarinet. It is a wine, but that's not what we're referring to. Yeah, Maz is on it. It's blood. So we call blood claret. Well, we don't necessarily all the time, but yeah, claret is blood. Thank you, Roman. And what is a dero? This is interesting. Thank you, Erica. A derelict burrow, a bottom. I can't be too rude, Penny. Homeless. Anything else? Yeah, it is a derogatory term, actually. He's a bit of a dero. It's yeah, whoops. Yeah, it's the person's maybe you consider them to not be the full quid, or perhaps a little bit intellectually impaired, or maybe they're homeless, or they're at a lower station to you, I guess. So it's not a very nice term. Okay, last one. What is dinky die? Something that is small? No. Teeny, like teeny weeny? No. Cute? I could see why you'd say cute. Christine's got question mark. No. Yeah, one of you are on it already. It's true blue, the real deal, genuine. We did one a couple of days ago as well. We've got like different terms for the same thing. And I guess that's probably not unusual from country to country as well. So genuine, or the real thing, dinky die. Thank you very much for that. And as I said a couple of days ago, if you were here, I look forward to coming over to America one day and meeting Donna and meeting a bunch of you and doing an American quiz. It's really looking forward to that. So thank you very much for engaging us in that little bit of fun. Yeah. All right. And we do one tomorrow as well. Yes, there are so many. So today we are going to look at this first part before our first little break, an overview of the 8 extras. Some of that might be a bit of revision for you. I'm not really sure what your level of experience is. I have taught 8 extraordinary vessels all over the world, and I have not really found anyone that's attended my workshops as having really much experience with it at all. Maybe that's why they're attending the workshops, to be fair. But whenever I go to a country that I've not been to before, I like to find out what their how they learn Chinese medicine. And different countries around the world have different ways that they do that. And I haven't really found any country that spends a lot of time talking about the 8 extras. So we're going to, as I said, give you either a bit of a revision or take you through the steps of it in more detail. The idea is, I guess, sure, to consolidate some knowledge, but to really immerse ourselves in the 8 extras, because what's going to happen is later in the workshop, we look at the 5 spirits and then we merge them together. And that's really cool. So tomorrow, when we merge them together, we look at how you put the 8 extras with the 5 spirits against emotions. And then we look at how you put the 8 extras up against the 5 spirits. So for spirits deficient, excess, or you're just looking to balance it, which of the 8 extras you'd use. Look at lots of acupuncture point combinations as well. There's so many treatments in this week, in this 2-day workshop. But to start off, we need to get in the background of it first. And then after the first break, we'll look at the Ren and the Do. They're the logical place to start. They're the 2 vessels that have their own points. They're the only 2 out of the 8 extras that do. We'll look at their images. They're pretty straightforward, but a lot of the 8 extras have images that aren't standard across the world. But these ones are pretty straightforward in terms of most people agree with where they're traveling. We look at their opening couple points, which they're really important ones, which we'll touch on in a minute, their English names, their functions, and look at a bunch of different acupuncture point combinations. It's going to be across a vast array of different disorders. So we'll look at musculoskeletal disorders, we'll look at mental emotional, we'll look at neurological, we'll look at a range of different conditions across the day. Then before lunch, we'll go through the Chong Mai. A couple of days ago, we spent a couple of minutes on the kidney spirit gate, but really didn't go into any great detail on it. But what we do is we go into more detail on it before lunch. And because the kidney spirit gate are potentially part of the Chong Mai, so we'll step through each point, explain why they're related to the different elements. And I think a couple of days ago, someone was asking about OCD and using the Chong Mai. And from memory, I think I might have whacked that in here too. I think it's 2 o'clock in the morning, please. I apologize if I can't remember everything that's in my slides. And then after lunch, we go into the Dai Mai, fascinating one in terms of it's the only one that cuts across you from front to back. Then after that, we spend more time looking at the Chow Mai and the Wei Mais. A ton of books and workshops that I've attended or read in the past gloss over these 4. And to be honest, when I first did the 8 Extraordinary Vessels as a presenter, I glossed over them too. It's about really having to hunt for information about them and then going, okay, well, this is new information for me. I've got to try this out in clinic and see what I think in terms of whether I consider what they're saying to be valuable and reliable. And, you know, I actually only just got a new book recently on the Chow Mai and haven't even had a chance to read it yet. But I'm looking forward to immersing myself more in that space as well. So we dedicate more time to the Chow Mai than probably you've ever probably seen before. And what I've done is I've looked to merge them sometimes. So looking at how you could use the Chow Mai and the Wei Mai together, or splitting off. And that's not just today, but also tomorrow as well. So sometimes, like say you're treating anxiety, for example, anxiety has a yin and a yang phase. So do you treat those the same? You potentially can, but you might want to be more target specific. So we look at different vessels for the yang phase, the yin phase. I think that's for pensiveness as well. And so what you'll see is you'll see different vessels being used across the weekend for various conditions. As I said, I'm really, really excited about that because it's that opportunity to be able to take the time and tease out these vessels instead of being told you've got an hour. Davo, I want you to do an 8 extras talk and you've got an hour, mate. And it's, okay, well, I will, but you're not really going to get the full flavour. And then, as I said, the Wei Mai's to finish off the day. And then tomorrow we go through the 5 spirits and tying it all together. I'll just look at what. Oh, yeah, Leanne, the auditory hallucinations. Yeah, let's touch base on that again. Jeff, hi Dave. In a previous lecture, you mentioned a 2-point Shen treatment. 1 point was kidney 24, the other point was heart 4. It was Ling, L-I-N-G, which is the feminine Shen, the yin side of the Shen spirit. So kidney 24 and heart 4 both have Ling, L-I-N-G in the name. So when we get to kidney 24, when we're going through the Chong Mai, you will get more information about that particular point. When you use it with heart 4, it's so kidney 24, heart 4 is the really good combo to help someone get a better sense of cleaning out the clutter. It's I gave the example of when I was in Denmark a few years ago, and a student got the treatment, then went home and cleaned out her walk-in robe and came in with all these shoes and seeing if anyone wanted any of her shoes. And so it's a declutterer. You know, you feel motivated to clear stuff in your body that's no longer self-serving moving forward, but we'll touch on that again when we get to the Chong later. But thank you, Jeff. And yep, auditory hallucinations later. I bet you're all wishing you were in Denmark now. You would have got all these shoes. So yes, so APC comes across the whole time through the 2 days. It's the acupuncture point combination. For those that have been at a number of my lectures before, you get it, you understand it. If you're new, it's a point prescription, it's a treatment protocol. It's like putting a whole bunch of acupuncture points together to make a formula, like you would with individual Chinese herbs, where you'd make them into a formula, where the points are working together as a team, rather than haphazardly going off and doing random things. Okay, so this was a new thing that just in the last 12 months, I went back and attempted to reread, which I've done on a number of occasions, the Li Shi Zhen 8 Extras book that Chip Chase and the other author, I apologize, has escaped me, attempting to immerse myself back in that world. It, for me, is a book that I've struggled to comprehend in terms of its entirety. And I guess that's good in a way, because it's a book that allows me to be able to go back to it time and time again and have another go, have another crack at it. And every time I do, I get something else in it that is like this gold. And so it's little bits and pieces. It's like trying to read a translated Paul Unschul book. You get the gold, but I don't feel like it's a book. They're books you can just read from start to finish. And so this was one just in the last 12 months. And so it says, for this reason, what the vessels govern, those who practice medicine and know of the 8 vessels comprehend the great purpose of the 12 channels and 15 networks. Those who practice transcendence and know of the 8 vessels miraculously attain the ascent and descent of the tiger and dragon and the subtle aperture of the mysterious female. So when I read it, I was intrigued. I wasn't automatically sold on what it all meant. And so then, of course, if you're intrigued, you don't give up. You go, okay, I'm going to go down that rabbit hole, and you look to see what it might mean. So there's multiple meanings really, and probably more than what I've even written here, but the dragon and the tiger, the two most common that I've sort of got a sense of is the dragon's more your yang chi, tiger's more your yin chi. So it's balancing out your yin and yang. So the 8 extras have the potential to balance out your yin and yang. Fair enough. Also has to do with the dragon being the intellect and the tiger being the sexual desire. So to subdue intellect and tame sexual desire, one needs contemplative practice. So again, it's okay to be intelligent, and it's okay to use your brain and work and work and work. But at times it's got to switch off, hasn't it? And I must admit that, and that's because I've been pushing myself really hard these last couple of weeks to get these slides written. But last night was not a good sleep, because when I finally went to bed, my brain decided it didn't want to go to bed. It said, Davo, I'm just going to keep going. And so what happened is, while I was attempting to sleep, is I was teaching my classes. I was doing, because I just did numerology for 2 days. So I was doing my students' numerology charts. I was doing their 5-element archetype charts. I was incorporating the 8 extraordinary vessels. I'm sure it was all really fascinating for those invisible people, but my brain decided to have a party instead of shutting down. God damn it. And that would be, in this case, a beautiful example of where the intellect didn't shut down when it was time to shut down, in order for that part of me to rest and recharge. In the same way as a sexual desire, there needs to be not too much, but then also not enough. So same with intellect, not charging your brain enough is also a negative. So you want the balance between too much or not enough in both those spaces. I mean, you can go back to the Yellow Emperor Classic, the Neijing, the Ling Shu, and they talk about sexual desire, and they talk about women and men and their ages and what's considered to be acceptable. And it makes for quite an interesting read. But it's just not taming that, but understanding the balance. I'm a Libran, it's our drive through our lives to try to maintain that balance. And that's what they're asking for here. And a couple of other little quotes from the Li Shi Jian book, which was written in 1578, by the way. So, we're going back 500 years. The mysterious female is synonymous with the primordial stillness that gives rise to the phenomenal world, gives birth to all things. It is an explicit identification with the primordial emptiness that is a consequence of mastering regulation of yin and yang within the body. And the mysterious female appears as an allusion to the principles of stillness and quietude. So it's alluding to the principles of stillness and quietude. It's quite it's not exclusively Taoist, but it's certainly looking at that sort of inner alchemy matching with the outer alchemy. It's looking at the 8 extras being potentially the birth of all things, in terms of, and that's what is happening here. At the point of our conception, the 8 extras are formed there off that Dantian, that original you. And it's going to regulate yin and yang. It's going to help with every aspect of our life. But we have to understand that if we want to have that best form of health, then we have to look at how we look after ourselves as well. Oh, do I have those bits missing from the printout? Oh, it's forward in the slides. Sorry about that, Christine. It's forward in the slides. All right, so Qi Jing Ba Mai is the 8 extraordinary vessels in its pinyin name. The Qi is not energy. Not that that's the best translation for Qi, but that's the one we know. In this case, it means extraordinary. Jing is vessel or channel, just like Jing law, channels and collaterals. Bar is the number 8. And my is a vessel that fills and empties or stores. We'll talk about that more as we go through this first little bit. It's certainly important to grasp that concept, even though I guess channels, whether they be the 8 extraordinary vessels or main channels or the branching outs and all the little law connecting and collaterals and everything, they're kind of, I guess, they're invisible essentially, even though we know they exist. So the concept that they can get larger and smaller or fill up like you're filling up a dam with water, and then they can empty and drain out. It's a strange concept to sort of grasp. That's what my MAI is implying, is that if you're happy and healthy and the body's got plenty of energy, then if you don't use it all up in the day, well, the 8 extras actually store it, which is a great concept for us to grasp. There's actually this possibility that we can, it's like storing something for winter. So if you're an animal that stores stuff up for the winter, then that's what these 8 extraordinary vessels are like. We store it, we store the spare chi, blood, body fluid, jing, builds until we need it. Because there's going to be days where we're running on empty, and so we need the 8 extras to step in there and say, right, I'll help you out, mate. Probably a bit like me today, but it'll be returned. It's like they go, okay, look, I'll give it out, but you're going to give it back, right? And as long as the 8 extras get that give and take, then they have no issues. The issue is if you keep giving out and not getting it back, that's when the 8 extras can shut down, and that creates disorder in the body. So it's been a bit hit and miss in terms of what's been available, certainly in English, and no doubt there's been plenty of material that's been lost over the centuries, but we've got some information from various places on the 8 extras throughout history. We have the Ling Shu, which is part of the Yellow Emperor Classic. We have the Nanjing, or Classic of Difficulties. So there was a bit of information through those. The Pulse Classic had some info. Huang Fu Mi, probably the first really large textbook that went through the steps of Chinese medicine, as far as I'm aware, that is in English. And then you can see there's a bit of a jump, really. Now, whether there's been information in that 1,000 years that I'm unaware of that existed, there is historical reasons for some of this, which is outside the scope of today and really would only be discussed if we end up having a bit of time at the end of each of the sections. But there's a reason why there was a lot more material that reappeared around that 1200 CE or AD. Had to do with the movable block printing, and they were able to produce a lot more textbooks instead of it being handwritten. So then moving on, we had some stuff, as I said, Li Shijian's book, even though it's 500 years old, that's been quite a very, very famous 8 Extraordinary Vessels book. The Great Compendium had some stuff in it as well, but we're still translating a large chunk of that into English and so on. In terms of what we have around, I don't know of all of the books that are around the world, and I don't know of a bunch of them that aren't in English, including, say, European countries that may have 8 extras books. I know there's a German publishing company, THIEME, which I always sort of just pronounced as theme. But when I was in Germany a few years ago, they said it's like Time. They've quite a big publishing company in Germany, and they have a lot of content that is not in English, but then they're producing more and more of it in English as well. So there may well be some 8 extra stuff through them or various other companies. The Donna Carey and Munich Accutonics book is good, and it's got some stuff on the ad extraordinary vessels. It's not really referenced, and it's in relation to tuning forks. Now, I actually love tuning forks, and I've found that book to be quite incredible, but it is just worth pointing out that it's coming at it from a slightly different angle, but I still found value in the Eight Extraordinary Vessels from that book. Yvonne Farrell's got a really good Eight Extraordinary Vessels book. It's not referenced, but she says that at the start of the book, and she says her references are her 20 plus years of clinical experience plus her mentors 50 plus years of experience. I think there's value there. The 8 extras are very hard to reference throughout history. I don't know anyone that's trying to use the 8 extraordinary vessels in clinical trials. If anyone here at the moment knows of anyone that's doing that, I'd love you to email me so I could find out more about it. But for those that want, I guess, that side of clinical experience, not clinical experience, research on 8 extras, good luck. And so a lot of the experience and research on 8 extras is actually through clinical experience. And so if that's how you get your information across, well, then that's the way it is at the moment. And I'm happy to accept that. I've got, I'd say 20 years of clinical experience on 8 extras because I basically ignored them for the first 10 odd years. Apologies to some of you that heard this story, but I had a teacher that taught us 6 hours of 8 extras. So 4 years full time, I got 6 hours on 8 extras. And the teacher, whose name also was David, and he had a potty mouth, he swore all the time in class. He hated the 8 extras and he didn't want to teach them. And so the whole 6 hours was just bagging the 8 extras. So I think most of us left the course thinking, well, the 8 extras don't work because our teacher told us that. Now we have free will. And it wasn't until the early 2000s when I started to be a teacher and I had to teach an 8 extras course in the degree, of course. And so I realized that I could either fake sell, fake it till you make it. But I realized that that wasn't going to do me any favors and it wasn't going to do my students any favors. So instead of faking it, I faced it. So don't fake it till you make it, face it till you make it. So I got any book I could find on the 8 extraordinary vessels and learnt more about them and realized that it's okay for my lecturer, David, to have that opinion about the 8 extras because we're all allowed to have opinions about things. But I didn't agree with it. And the first person that I treated with the 8 extraordinary vessels was myself. And we've got some clinical experiences of that as we go through this next 2 days. I mean, where are you going to start? I started with myself. I started with my mum, friends, family members. Once I started to really get a sense of the value, I incorporated it into my clinic. And then, as I said, about the last 20 years, I've been using it consistently. I don't use the 8 extras all the time, but when I know that they're to be used, I expect really good results from them. I've got a chapter of it in my book. I wanted to write an entire book on the 8 extraordinary vessels, and I think that will probably happen one day. The Characters of Wisdom is looking at each point and what they represent from a Chinese character perspective, not necessarily through the English names. And it's got some stuff on the 8 extras in that. Very much 5-element acupuncture based. Obviously, that Monkey Press 8 extras book is one of the most famous. Giovanni's got a channels book, which is really good, has a big chunk of information on 8 extras. Matsumoto and Birch, that was the first 8 extras book I ever read. And that was the book that we used as a reference when I was studying. Jeremy Ross has a very small section on 8 extras. I think it's about 12 pages in the whole book. and it's really good. And at the very start of it, he says, I can't prove anything that I'm about to say through referencing. I can only go off clinical experience. That's okay with me. Jeremy Ross is a guru of Chinese medicine. And so I'm willing to trust that. And it was a really good section, power pack, 12 pages. David Twicken wrote a book 10 odd years ago now. I can't believe how quick time goes, on the 8 extras that I thought was good. So that's that. The 8 extraordinary vessels are a fascinating and important part of the channel system in Chinese medicine. No matter how much one researches them, there's always a new aspect emerging, a new understanding, a new angle. I just gave you a perfect example of that when I was immersing myself back into the Li Shizhen 8 extras book. But every single book on 8 extras or workshops on 8 extras, you're usually going to find something new or a different angle to come at something. And I'm continually refining my 8 extras treatments. So I'm not stuck on it's being done in this way. If something is working consistently, I don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's working fine. Let's keep going with it. But it's interesting when I go back to my first experiences with 8 extras and thinking back to the treatments I did and going back and looking at really old workshops that I did as I was writing this, and the treatments that I'm using are quite different, some of them now. And often it's actually someone else putting out a textbook on 8 extras, reading it, getting my sense of what I think, maybe trying it out on myself, that could also refine the way that I do it. And I think that's probably a good way to look at treating people, is that you don't just do things the same all the time. You're constantly trying to evolve. And all of the pictures are from Elsevier Churchill Livingston. So comparison between the 12 main channels and 8 extras. This is a very small slide that's really not covering everything, but it's covering probably enough for us as we stay deliberately. We're not going into exhaustive detail. So in terms of yin and yang partners, the 12 main channels all have yin yang partners. The 8 extraordinary vessels don't, but they do have an effect on different channels and different organs. Sometimes people say that the Ren and the Du are yin and yang partners. Technically, they're not, but the Renmai does work on yin-based stuff, and the Du-mai does work on yang-based stuff. But then you've also got connections across the opening and couple points, but that still doesn't make those connections yin and yang partners. In terms of organ relationships, each of the 12 main channels obviously have multiple organs they treat, not just the organ that the channel's named after. So obviously the lung channel treats the lungs, but it also treats the large intestine and a number of other organs, but primarily it's treating the lungs. In terms of the 8 extras, they don't have direct relationships with organs. There's been an attempt to try to do that from some authors. The Ren and the Du will have often have conversation around their value in terms of treating the kidneys, for example, the heart. In terms of direct relationships, I'd probably call it more of an indirect. I'd have to say that the 8 extras probably really do have a direct relationship with your dantian, which is, directly connected to the kidneys, but that's still kind of an indirect relationship. 8 extras to dantian to kidneys, kidneys to dantian, out to 8 extras. The depth in the body, the 12 main channels are much more towards the surface, whereas the 8 extras, even though they have superficial contact with where you needle, they're actually much deeper. I don't know whether you visualize them as being almost absorbing into the layers of the body, right down into the very middle of us. So if we're standing side on and we look at the person and we look from the back, from the front to the back, and we picture the very middle of that person, that's kind of where the 8 extras are getting down into. The points on the channels, the 12 main channels all have their own points. The 8 extras only do for the Ren and the Dumai. The rest share or borrow points from the other channels. Do they have special point categories? The 12 main channels have a wide range of different point categories, don't they? Yuan source, law connecting, Shi cleft. We've got the Jing well, Ying spring, Shu stream, etc. The 8 extras have opening a couple points. 4 of them have Shi cleft points. So the Yin and Yang Chow Mai and the Yin and Yang Wei Mai have got Shi cleft points. They are the vessels that are getting closer to the surface of the body. So they're kind of like merging the external part of us where the 12 main channels are and everything else that's external through to those deeper Ren, Du, Chong and Dai Mai. So the Shi cleft points are kind of working more rapidly to move something that's deep back out to the surface, or to move excess spare stuff from the surface into the 8 extras. The Du, the Ren and the Chong are the first 3 channels made in the body. I'm pretty sure that's a quiz question. The Du, the Ren and the Chong are the first 3 channels made in the body. They start in the space between the kidneys where the lower dantian is located, which makes them inherently linked to the kidneys, which we touched on 5 minutes ago. So, checking my timing. So at the point of your conception, as I said, you get a ball of energy, which is the dantian, which is your mum and dad's energy and your ancestors' energy, which makes you who you are. From the point of that, I guess, ball of energy, you grow off that. And as you grow off that, the Ren, the Du, and the Chong, and I think the Dai actually, because I mean, it's where it's cutting through, they're all growing off that dantian. The Ren, the Du, and the Chong all start there and all come down in one line, and all 3 of them come out at the surface at Ren 1. So technically, the Du, the Ren, and the Chong's first acupuncture point is Ren 1. It would be confusing to label that across the 3, and so we don't call the first Du channel point Ren 1, but that's where it actually comes out at the surface first, and then it swings around and starts officially at Du 1. But I guess that's what that's trying to say, is that the 3 of them come down in a kind of a tube and come out at Ren 1, whereas the Dai Mai kind of cuts, it's a bit of a stepped thing, but it's essentially cutting straight through like a disc, but it's growing off that dantian too. The 8 extraordinary vessels are at a deeper level and the energetic strata of the human body, and all can treat the root. So it's treating the root or original you. So for me, whether it be a disease works its way from the outside all the way in, or that a disease was handed to you by your ancestors and your parents at conception. Now, there is a bit of a disagreement with that, which I put in the slides. I didn't leave it out because it creates an interesting kind of, would potentially create a debate, which of course we can't do in this space because I'm the only one talking, but I don't leave things out of slides just because they might say something opposite to what I say. It's there, it's information, it's worth considering. But I personally think that the 8 extras can have disease that's been plonked in there by your ancestors and your parents. And then it's your job potentially to clear it out, or you pass it on to your children. But I also definitely acknowledge that disease can be created externally that we don't deal with. It stays in, it goes into your Xiaoyang, and it works its way further into the body and ends up in the 8 extras. Either way, both processes require us to treat the root and to climb that back out again. So what do, the 8 extras? They strengthen the association among the channels and collaterals. They control, join, store, and regulate all of the vital substances, qi, blood, body fluid, jing, or essence. They help to balance the flow left, right, up, down, anterior, posterior, interior, exterior. Pretty straightforward. Act as a dam or reservoir. Absorbs overflows from the main channels. Whatever is spare flows into the 8 extras. It's like a dam that's got water in it, and gradually with the rains, it starts to build and build and build. And that's what it does here. We have the dam wall closed to allow it to build and build. But we also have this kind of image of the 8 extraordinary vessels walls being semi-permeable, like a sieve, and it allows some stuff in and it'll store it. And then when it feels like it, it'll allow some stuff out. And it's that kind of give and take. And that's what the 8 extras, how they work in a healthy person. They store when there is spare, and they release it back when needed, as long as there's enough. Again, if your body starts to lose too much, then your 8 extras shut down and they say, no way, I'm not giving any more out. It comes down to this concept of your limbs being irrelevant to your survival in terms of needing vital substances. Where the vital substances need to go for you to survive in Chinese medicine is your trunk. So all your main organs is where the energy must be to keep you alive. So your extremities includes your head. So this is not needed for you to basically live in Chinese medicine, neither in your arms, neither in your legs. So the 8 extras, when they start to become quite starved, then they shut down. And when they shut down, all they're doing is basically core level stuff, keeping your organs functioning. So you have no energy in your legs, no energy in your arms, no energy in your head. And so something like chronic fatigue syndrome, for example, would suggest that your 8 extraordinary vessels are quite fatigued and deficient and weakened and like a dam that hasn't had rain in it for years and years and it's getting really low. That's what we sort of picture with this. And so it shuts down and doesn't give the energy out because it doesn't give it out to the areas that don't need it. You can still function. So of course you've got fatigue. You've got a brain that's not working properly, so you're mentally imbalanced. You can't think. You're probably a bit emotional because you don't have that energy flowing into this part of your body, which of course we consider in Western medicine to be vitally important. The 8 extras provide some support to the defensive or Wei Qi, as long as, again, there's enough. It's the same thing. If you've got enough, sure. And the 8 extras will help defend your body against external pathogens. Or if the pathogen's worked its way in a little bit and is stuck in the Xiaoyang division, the 8 extras can help to push that out. I mean, is everyone that's got COVID, or maybe had the vaccinations but hasn't had COVID, is basically everyone on the planet, have they got some Xiaoyang stuff happening? It's lodged, a part of the COVID virus is lodged in our Xiaoyang. There was this really funky pattern of disharmony that I saw recently from Giovanni's Foundations book, I think it was, or maybe it was from his psych book actually. And it was something along the lines of lungs invaded by wind heat, fair enough, lodging in the Xiao-Yang division, leading to heart Shen disturbance, something like that. So I'm paraphrasing, but it's something along the lines of that. It's a mouthful. Lungs invaded by wind heat, lodging in the Xiao-Yang division, leading to a heart Shen disturbance. I mean, when you think about it, it's not illogical. I've never diagnosed a single person in 30 years with that diagnosis. And some people probably say, oh, that's a Giovanniism. But I think, and that was written, the psych book that I have of his was written in 2009. So COVID didn't exist then. I think that that diagnosis is going to be really interesting over the next 5 odd years, at least, because I think that if we were to loosely say that COVID was lungs invaded by wind heat, loosely, it would be partially that, but a lot more, then we don't completely get over it. Whether we got COVID and then it lodges in the Xiao-Yang, or we had the vaccination and it lodged in the Xiao-Yang, or both. And over the next 5 years, are we going to get more mental health issues from our patients because of that? We already have mental, emotional impact from COVID through people going broke, businesses closing down, people losing their homes, increased rates of suicide, you know, you name it, it's impacted on us. But how's it going to impact on us over the next 10, 20 years? Or what about COVID impacting future births? I mean, I don't know, but that's an interesting one. And the reason I say that is because if the 8 extras are strong, they're doing their damnedest to try to keep your defensive chi strong, to try to keep viruses, colds, flus, bugs, germs out of the body. Why let it in the first place? Only let good stuff in. So if the 8 extras are strong, they'll just go, no, you're not coming in. It's like the greatest bouncer at a nightclub. You know, you go up to the door and you see him or her and you go, yeah, I'm not even going to try. You just don't even try. Why bother? That's what we're looking at here. You want that wall, that support. They also connect the main organs and the channels with the 6 extraordinary organs. So you can potentially use the 8 extras to treat the gallbladder, the brain, the blood vessels, and so on. So the 8 extras have a lot of value in terms of men's and women's health. You can see it's treating the uterus. So a lot of the 8 extras are very good, as I said, in that space. And that's not discounting the value that it can offer males as well. And that's further to that involvement with the 7-year cycles in women and the 8-year cycles of men. So it's connected to our genetic coding. So we know those processes and steps. So it's through all those cycles of life. And so that could indicate things like genetic diseases, for example, or we're not tracking through where we would logically go. So maybe a female has primary amenorrhea, for example, because they're just getting their period way later than that you would have expected. And so you could argue maybe the 8 extraordinary vessels have been impacted negatively by some sort of genetic situation. So in terms of function, they access the opening and couple points, or they're referred to as confluent points. So they're kind of 2 names, really. So we've got the opening and couple points we'll talk about in a minute. All of them collectively are referred to as confluent. Confluent or confluence is kind of like the merging of two rivers into one. It's connecting pathways, and the 8 extraordinary vessels are very good at doing that. So I think that's quite a good term for it. The opening and coupled is, I guess, referring to what you need in terms of accessing the 8 extras, which we'll get to now. All of the 8 extraordinary vessels give access to primordial energy, and each has its special key, the unlocking of stores of memory lodged in the heart, in the cells, and in the muscles. And those keys, the confluent points, are also called opening and coupled. So, have I got it later? So I'll mention it here. So it's like you want to access one of the vessels, that's fine. It's like you go up to a front door of a house and you need 2 keys because there's 2 locks. And that's the opening point is 1 key, the couple point is the 2nd key. So you've only got 1 key, you unlock that part of the door, no problems, but then you still can't get in. So you needed the 2nd key to unlock the 2nd lock, door opens, here we go. And that's what the opening and couple points do. There's ways that you can use those keys. There's no necessarily set rule in terms of what order you use the keys. And in fact, if you do bilateral needling, you have 4 keys or 4 locks. So which key do you use first? In the end, if you open all 4 locks in any order, it's still going to open, isn't it? So the argument is that you could really do the opening and couple points in any order and you would still get the same result. I tend to have a bit of a step-by-step process, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And they can treat inherited memory or memories one wishes to forget, have squashed away deep inside. So there may be this genetic memory that's been passed down through the generations that's sitting there in the 8 extras, or a memory that is something that you've been able to forget about, but you never got rid of it. Rather than deal with it, you suppressed it. And over time, it will work its way into the 8 extras, which can create trauma in the future. It's not doing you any favors swallowing it down. Swallow it down. Swallow it down. I mean, what was that? I mean, you might have liked the movie. I didn't think it was very good. It was probably quite a long time ago now. Quite a long time ago, 10, 15 years ago, maybe. Anger Management. I love Jack Nicholson. Don't much like the other fella, but didn't really like the movie. But the idea is very valid. If you're going to squash anger inside and keep swallowing it, sooner or later it's going to bubble up like a volcano and erupt. And what we don't want is for people to swallow unhappy memories and just pretend they don't exist, because it's still existing inside us. And it's bubbling away, becoming toxic, sludgy, gunky, feral, and sooner or later it's going to create disease in the body. If you're lucky, you get through your life before it does, but then chances are you probably pass that on to your children. You gave them a little chunk of that at the point of their conception. The illnesses of these vessels cannot emerge from within these vessels themselves. And this is that where I was saying I don't agree with that. They're always caused by an influx from the main channels. I'm not saying Unschild's wrong. He's just translating one of the classics. And so I'm actually disagreeing with the classic. How dare I do that? I've seen too many examples of where that statement's wrong. Just too many examples. So that doesn't mean that all of the classics content is wrong. That's an opinion from a person 2,000 years ago that wrote that little section. And do we know whether the translation is accurate when Untitled got a hold of whatever his material was when he translated, had it already been compromised to some degree. Untitled doesn't have an opinion. He presents the information to us. So it's an interesting one, but I don't agree. I do agree with when the 8 extraordinary vessels receive evil influences, they stagnate in them, but I think they can have been given evil influences at your conception. Genetic diseases, just one example. So you could treat genetic diseases using the 8 extras. So they work on this thing called 3 ancestries. This was kind of a newer thing just in the last 10 odd years that I found. And initially I kind of went, well, I'll just sit on that, do some work on it and see what I think. So 10 years ago when I first saw this, I didn't put it into any of my presentations. I kind of held on to it and sort of thought I'll process. I think there's good value here. I think there's merging of ancestries. This is continually evolving for me. And I think that there might be a better way of kind of putting it together. But at the moment, I'm happy enough with the way that it is. But it's certainly something bubbling around in my brain to be edited to some degree as the future rolls on. Excuse me. So the first ancestry is the Ren, the Do, the Chong, and I'd say definitely the Dai. It's part of the bonding or lack thereof between a newborn child and parents. They also have an impact on the baby that is still in the womb. So it's the part of us that we can target where we can go back to treating someone for that original genetic part of themselves through the 9-month in the womb, through to a little bit past birth, through breastfeeding, certainly. Probably about the end of the breastfeeding would be about where that first ancestry ends. So if there's issues dating back to that period, then you could go back and treat these vessels. We'll look at that in more detail through each of the vessels. The second ancestry and the third are a bit sort of mushed, in my opinion. So the Waymais help us when we're too busy looking into the past or the future rather than the present. But I think it's also part of the third, which is the Chow Mais. This helps us with our self-esteem, both the external part of our self-esteem, so how we think the society views us, or how we know the society views us, through to our internal sense of self, our inner critic, our optimist, our heart shines, our balance between yin and yang on the inside. And then it's about how you take that self, not just out into the external and processing internal, but how you take yourself out into your world. Still connecting your sense of self with living in the present moment and not going back too far into the past or jumping too far into the future. I think by the end of today, if that doesn't make sense, it'll make a lot more sense as we go through each of the vessels. When to use for mental and emotional problems, we'll give some examples. Problems of more of one of the 12 main channels. That's one of the really good ones, because that's where you do. I used this example a few days ago. It's like the 8 extras have a subtle nature to them, but they're also like being slapped with a brick. We'll give you some gentle stuff, but we're also going to rock you a bit. So and then depending on how aggressive you are, it depends on how much you're slapped. So it's picturing the patient as being an apple tree, and you give them a bit of a shake and see what falls out of the tree. You want some old rotten apples to fall off the tree, but you don't want the good apples to fall off that are still ripening. What else is in that tree? Maybe an old kite that had flown up there that's getting old, and it was something, maybe it was a kid's toy once, and the kid is still emotional about having lost their toy kite. you name it. There's all these kind of ways you can look at what happens when you shake this tree, what falls out, good or bad. And when you use the 8 extras, how much you're shaking the tree. And so the more of the 8 extras that you use in the one treatment, the more you've shaken the tree. And one of the ways you can be gentle can actually be really effective at treating multiple channels and organs at the same time. And that's a little shake to get rid of the new signs and symptoms to better expose the more chronic, long-standing stuff, which leads into treating complicated, chronic, or confusing conditions. Neurological conditions, you can use the 8 extras. Be careful. Certain neurological conditions, the patient's pretty gassed already. There's not a lot of vital substances in their system. So you would build their vital substances first before you would do the 8 extras. And then elite athletic sports performance, musculoskeletal complaints, sports injuries, that type of thing. We'll look at those in a bit of detail as well. So mental and emotional could be any, really. Depression, anxiety, anger, pensiveness, worry, fear. I give those examples because basically most of them will be giving examples for throughout this next 2 days. Regulates the 5 spirits. This is part of the whole purpose of this 2 days, is to look at the combination. Intergenerational imprinting, we talk about that when we do the Chong Mai, but essentially we're looking at the fact that genetically we have been given information, good or bad, from our ancestors and our parents. We get a bunch of good stuff. We also get some stuff that's potentially not so good. And that can include mental and emotional disorders that a person never dealt with, and then they pass that on to their kids. In my opinion, I believe that's definitely what can happen. Can treat what's haunting us, known or unknown. If we've got a sense of it, or we just feel like there's something inherently wrong, but we don't know what it is, potentially the 8 extras can help. Good for insomnia and good for addictions. So different types of addictions might call for a different vessel to treat. I give you some examples throughout the next couple of days. I think we talk about alcohol addiction, cigarettes, addictions, but essentially you're looking at pretty much any form of addiction can be accessed or treated with the 8 extras. Problems of more than one of the 12 main channels or organs. Maybe you've got, say, asthma and eczema due to a lung and kidney imbalance. That could be a childhood thing that you grow out of. It could be other more long-standing stuff, or you don't have any issues, and then later in life you start to get problems. Fluid retention due to, say, lung, spleen, kidney imbalances. Abdominal distension with acid reflux. So the spleen's deficient, so you get the energy, the damp going down, and the stomach is excess, so you get the heat coming up. So we look at an example of that where there's too much heat going up and too much damp going down. I think the Daimai, we talk about that. Poor circulation in the legs. Give some examples of that throughout this next 2 days as well. Irritable bowel syndrome due to stomach, large intestine, or yang ming imbalance can be quite complicated. The 8 extras can help, and I give you an example. Infertility due to virtually anything. The 8 extras are great for, proven through thousands and thousands and thousands of patients around the world. They're falling pregnant when they couldn't. What did it? Well, you could argue any number of different things, but we're starting to see a bit of a theme that the 8 extras can be very helpful for that. Thyroid problems are a possibility. If they're really deficient, you've got to build them first before you do the 8 extras. Heat above, cold below, we'll talk about. Patient has so many signs and symptoms, you don't know where to start. Definitely. Neurological conditions, you can do post-stroke recovery with the 8 extras. I've done that on a number of occasions. Same thing. If they're deficient, build the deficiency first, then use the 8 extras. MS, again, treated patients in that space, granted not for a while now, but gee whiz, when I was treating MS patients, if the 8 extras were warranted, they showed really encouraging results. Hemiplegia, we look at some examples. Dementia, we do Bell's palsy, we look at seizures, altered levels of consciousness, certain types of migraines, on and on and on. It's possible. Not to say that it will be effective, but it's possible. You can do elite athletic sports performance, which we'll touch on in a minute. You could do things like chronic neck pain with occipital headaches, or the bone I call the octopus bone. So chronic neck pain with octopus headaches. Low back pain with sciatica, or a combination. I think I'll look at an example with the Dumai where the patient's got chronic neck pain with octopus headaches and low back pain and sciatica. So how you can treat all of that. Is it too overwhelming? It's actually possible, and not with a million needles, by using one of the 8 extras. Can assist muscle recovery post-exercise, very good at flushing the muscles, getting the blood moving, helps with recovery, can help speed up sports injuries. Word of warning, of course, is that if you tell your patients that they may go back to sport sooner than when the muscle has fully recovered, it will speed up recovery, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they can go back to the sporting event much sooner than what they were, because there's still only so much that you can do with Chinese medicine. Sometimes the body still needs time. Like who's going to do that anyway? But there's no clinical trials on acupuncture for ruptured ACLs. So let's say the person completely ruptures their anterior cruciate ligament, they have their knee reconstruction, then it's 9 to 12 months. I think I'm starting to see some stuff coming out of the US that's looking at 6 months. One of the things that takes so much time is that you drill holes through bones to thread a new tendon in there, and then it attaches to new bones which fill those holes. So that new bit of bone that plugs the hole has to knit onto the old bone. So that takes time. So just because you might be all flexible and you've got good muscle strength again in your legs, and both your left and right legs have similar leg strength and muscle mass, it doesn't mean that those bones are fully knitted. And acupuncture can try to speed that up, but there's still only going to be so much that it can do. So just be aware of the speed at which that happens. And my example is, you're not going to get a lot of athletes that volunteer to go back to elite sport sooner to risk snapping a new ACL. Who's doing that? Who's signing on for that? I ruptured my ACL. It was excruciatingly painful. I'm not signing on for another one of them. No, thanks. Yes, that was awful. So that's not something we can really test. Maybe we can test for, say, torn calves and doing 8 extraordinary vessels to speed them up and seeing if you can come back from that sooner. But every sport injury that re-injures itself has an inherent risk of causing additional trauma, bigger trauma in the same muscle, in tendons associated with the muscle, or different muscles. Because obviously when a muscle has injured itself, other muscles are affected as a result of that. And so that can compromise other parts of your body. The elite athletic sports performance we'll touch on later in the next 2 days. If I run out of time, we can touch base with emails and things like that. But it's just looking at how you could use the 8 extras to potentially treat a person before a sporting event to give them a big energy flush. So if I have got time at any point this next 2 days, I'll try to spend a bit of time talking about that. I'll just write that down. Okay. There's no hard and fast rule for how you use the 8 extras, because for centuries we spoke about them, but then not how to use them. So they're described in the old books or classics. There were unfortunately few descriptions of the needle or moxa techniques recommended. So Matsumoto and Birch will have their style with iron pumping cords and, various other, say, Japanese style of acupuncture, which will be different to other people's way of doing the 8 extras. And they're right, and so am I. The different ways that the 8 extras are done, if you're seeing the results, then multiple ways of doing it can be correct. Yeah. So it's still very polarizing when a TCM therapist suggests how to treat. So, and how would you go about performing clinical trials on the 8 extras? That's what I mean. We've talked about this already. I'd love to see it. So they're the main vessel down the left-hand side with their opening and couple points. And then it says the paired vessel, not because they're yin and yang partners, but because they share the opening and couple points. So if you look at the one at the top, I don't know if my cursor's working here, but you'll see Renmai, lung 7, kidney 6 paired with the yin chow. So in theory, when you open up the Renmai using your locks and your keys to locks, you've actually unlocked a second door. Or it's the same door, but it leads to 2 paths. That's probably a better way of saying it. And you actually access both paths. So you can't really kind of treat one vessel on its own. You almost, by default, have some impact on a second one. Intention makes a difference, in my opinion. Maybe the way that you needle them in certain orders, but just know that the more that you open, it doubles. So if you open 2, then you've opened 4. 2 primarily, 2 secondarily, but still 4. How do I do it? I needle the opening points both sides. So if I'm doing the, say, Renmai, I'm going to do my lung 7s both sides, and then I'll go down and do my 2 kidney 6s. That's the order of the locks that I do. After that, I do 1 or more points on the vessel. So my lung 7s, my kidney 6s, some Ren points. And then if I need to do any more, I do other non-Ren channel points. When I take them out, I don't necessarily do them in exactly reverse order, but what I finish with is the coupled point comes out, then the opening point comes out. So lung 7 went in, kidney 6, some Ren points, maybe spleen 6, heart 7, whatever. Then they can all come out, but the last ones are kidney 6 and then lung 7 last. It's like I'm framing the instructions for the patient. I want the body to target the Renmai, so I'm giving it clear instruction that I'm opening up a door that goes to 2 hallways. The primary energy and vital substance flow is going down this hallway with less going down this one. So it's like I'm giving the body clear instruction about that. Other way, I'll have a break shortly. Other ways to use the opening point unilateral with the couple point also unilateral. Usually that's opposite sides, but not always. So for example, for male patients, you use the opening point on the left side, and then you put the couple point on the right, or if they're a female patient, you do it the other way around. The opening point's on the right side, couple point on the left. It's not a perfect example because there's also plenty of authors and presenters that I've gone and watched that have said it's the other way around. So it's in the end what you believe is working for you. You could also use the opening point on either side, followed by the couple point on the opposite, then come back So you do, let's say, lung 7 on whatever side, go down to kidney 6, back up to lung 7, back down to kidney 6. It creates a bow tie effect. Or you do the opening point on one side, then both coupled points come back up to the opening point. So you've created like a box. Opening, 2 coupled, back up to opening. Maybe the patient's got one-sided pain, so you use the opening point on that side, followed by the coupled point on the opposite. Or there's also the argument that on a painful side, you do the opening point on the opposite side. So again, what's right or wrong? You got to try these things out and see what seems to work for you. The patient's body is trying to use the needles that you've put in them to get the best possible outcome. So, that's good to bear in mind, that you could really mishmash and do points that maybe don't even treat the condition that you're treating, and the body's probably still going to try to use the vital substances that you've generated to have an effect. You can deliberately injure someone with Chinese medicine. We know that. And we can deliberately counterflow qi. We can deliberately give people the worst possible herbal formula for them. We can do that. Sometimes we've done it accidentally. Sometimes it just happens. I mean, a point like stomach 9, it's a point that we typically want to use to send energy away from the head. It's still connecting to the head, and it's connecting the head to the body, but primarily its focus is to take excess from the head down. If you needle stomach 9 wrong, it jams and shoots it back up again. It's like it rebounds and creates significant trauma for the patient. So even if you needle a point wrong, you can have problems. You could diagnose via pulse or vessel palpation, abdominal palpation, to decide what vessels you're going to use and how you use them. That's really practical sort of workshops for that sort of situation. And then in the end, you have to just decide what you're going to do. Fantastic shirt. That's a horrible idea. What time? It's you have to weigh up the 8 extras, really. It might seem like a horrible idea, but in the end, if it's possibly the best way of doing something, then maybe you should be booking the appointment in. What time? So it's a process. You need to look at your patient. I really recommend a series of standard acupuncture treatments before you'd ever tackle the 8 extras. In terms of real serious treatment, even if you're just going to treat one, get the patient ready. The 8 extras work better if you get the patient ready for it. And I know, because I've had some very personal bad examples of not having got ready first. And look, the more you use, the more aggressive it is. As I said, the more that you'll shake that apple tree. And you need to be careful. I think this is basically the last slide before we have our little break. I just got a couple of questions to ask you. So thanks for bearing in there. I thought this would take a little bit less time than it has. Personal example. The first person I treated with the 8 extras was me, and I opened all of them. So that's all of the confluent points bilateral with 16 needles. It's interesting navigating that. It's easy enough to get the 8 in your legs, but then when you're trying to navigate, points in your arms with needles already in your arms, so I'm getting lung 7 in here, and then it's dangling in here while I do that side, and then I've got my peri 6 Sanjiao 5s, and I'm trying not to do too much of that because the needle in the tendons, and then getting to small intestine 3 on both hands. That was a neat trick. And then I lay back and had a little meditation for 30 odd minutes, and then took them all out. I was unstoppable for a week. I was, oh my goodness. I wouldn't say I was like cartoons that you see sometimes where a person or an animal or whatever has had 100 coffees and they're running around upside down on the roof and they're achieving enormous amounts of stuff. I mean, there was a Family Guy episode where, what's his name? I can't remember, but he was shown Red Bull, and it was incredibly hysterical how much he was achieving in such a short space of time, making for a very amusing episode. But yes, it all turned to SHIT in the end. But point being is that that's potentially what opening them all did. It was, but what was happening is there was a shut off. There was all this energy when there was energy to be had, but then I shut down when it was time to rest, and then boom, I was away again, and then rest, boom. And so for, I think it was about 7 days, I was unstoppable. And then day 8, I couldn't get out of bed. I was telling everyone to F off. I was the worst human for 3 or 4 days. And it's because I didn't know that was going to happen. I mean, what did I expect? Let's be honest. But, you know, experiment on yourself before you experiment on someone else. So I learned that you get the energy, but there's a trade-off, if that's the right term. You fall off into severe weakness and deficiency because you opened all the extras, you flooded your body with vital substances, you're unstoppable for a week, but then your body went, yeah, I've got no more now. I've got enough to keep you functioning, but I'm not giving you any more. So we're shutting down. I'm not giving you any energy anymore. You're going to be hopeless and you won't be able to move. Your brain hasn't got any energy anymore. You're not going to be able to think. You'll be emotional. And then you need to build it back up again. That's fair enough. That's what I did. I just built the energy back up again. But it's just, be careful. All right, so what we might do is quickly I'll look back at the chat during the break and see if there's anything important. But I just wanted to ask you, if you just put in the chat now, how much you've learnt about the 8 extraordinary vessels in your experience. Did you do 6 hours in your entire course like me? Did you do a lot more? Have you learnt from others about the 8 extras? If you could just put in the chat. Yeah, Hannah, put that question in the Q&A, please, in the Q&A box. Cheryl, I don't remember much. Someone put the elite athletic performance into the Q&A as well, because it'll stay there and I won't lose it. There was an 8 extras course offered when I was in school, don't recall much, very little training, was fascinated. Some information from Jeffrey UN. Yep, less than 6 hours. CEU course, 8 hours. Yeah. Yeah, that's why you're excited for this course, because you don't use them much. Yeah, Yvonne Farrell, that's right. Not much in school. Many seminars with Kiko. Some from coursework, books, most from experience. 16 to 20 hours. Yeah, they are important for these changing times. And that leads into some of your answering the next question anyway. Have you done any other study on the vessels? Learned a bit. They were so important. Very frustrating finding more information. Less than 6 hours. Yeah. I had one teacher who really loved them. Fantastic. I've found that very few and far between. Feel inspired too. Lovely. One day of instruction for a point location exam. Yeah. Self-study, Giovanni's book. Yeah, Channel's book. And what are your thoughts now? Like, does that last hour and a half kind of get you a bit excited? Some of you have already answered that too. Bits and pieces. Yeah, pack a punch. Love them. Yep, thank you. Love using them. First couple of years of practice. You betcha. Memorize them, but don't know much about how to use them. I know, and then that's good, but yeah. Remain elusive to you, hopefully not by the end of tomorrow. Renewed interest, try it on yourself. Yes. Always nice to hear a different perspective. Great review already. Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing. All right, so it must be, what is that? 3:38 in the morning for me. So it must be 10:38 in, yes, thank you, Donna. So let's be back just before 10:50 then Los Angeles time, please. So stretch your legs and do what needs to be done. If you've got a really important question that you think I might have missed anywhere, if you put it in the Q&A for me, please. I'll look back through this now during the break. So go and grab yourself 10 minutes and we'll be back to continue on. Thank you.
Recording stopped.